According to the Department of Defense, the three men accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks have reached a plea deal. In exchange for the prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty, the men agreed to plead guilty to all charged offenses, including the murder of 2,976 people. However, specific details of the pretrial agreement are not yet publicly available, but the White House has made sure to distance itself from the deal.
And does he have a message to some of the 9/11 families who wanted to see a full trial, who wanted to see this kind of come to a fuller process?
So look, this is basically what Jake said. This is something that we had no involvement in. He didn't have any involvement in. And so the White House played no role in this process. And the president directed his team to consult as appropriate with officials and lawyers and Department of Defense, obviously. We have said this before. We are, our hearts go out to the families who lost the loved ones on that day. The president on 9/11 has honored them every year, and the families who lost their loved one on that terrible day.
Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze Media, as well as FBI whistleblower and Center for Renewing America senior fellow Steve Friend. Steve, this is one of the worst attacks that we've ever seen on this country. So why are we now making the decision 23 years later to say, okay, let's give them a plea deal?
Well, this is the byproduct of a gross stew of people that are involved at the upper levels of our government at this point. There are the system people, there are the outcome people, and then there are the outcome people who pretend to be system people. System people being the prosecutors here who just want to get a W. Give me a plea. That's a conviction. That's a win. Get this off my plate. Let me move on and say that I got the conviction in the 9/11 case. Why don't you move me up as a careerist? You have the outcome people, Khalif Sheikh Mohammed, who is just laughing at the desecration of our judicial system, of our system itself here, where we've allowed him to live here for a quarter of a century and provided him shelter and food. And he was all too happy to give up his life for that cause, but I'm sure he'll live the next several decades on our dime continually. And then last, you have the outcome people pretending to be system people. And those are the people that pulled the wool over the eyes of the American people, wrapped themselves in the flag and pretend to be all about patriotism. And they got us to sign up for things like the Patriot Act. They gave the FBI the national security responsibility, the ability to look at innocent Americans and spy on them, and got young men to join the military and go overseas so that they could hit their bottom line with Lockheed Martin and Boeing. It's an utter desecration of our system.
Steve, I appreciate those comments. I mean, before we get into some of the details, don't you think what's really at stake here is mainstream America's understanding and faith in the rule of law in this country?
I do. I think there's an aspect to it, too, because people genuinely don't understand about a fair process, and that what the goal of the government should be here is to pursue the fair process. And why do we have laws? The other thing that people forget about when it comes to laws is we have this message of why do we have it? The question is, do we have laws to ensure justice, to provide just outcomes for victims of crime, to ensure that we live in a civil society? Or do we live in a system that creates laws to give more power to the government to go after innocent Americans? And we have now transitioned into that latter state here. And I mean, I just hope and pray that this type of outcome, the utter miscarriage of justice that we all witnessed, can be the shot in the side of the head that so many people need to wake up and see what's gone on with their own government.
I want to switch gears with you and go back to the Trump assassination attempt now. And earlier today, you posted on X about the FBI's potential classification of that event as domestic terrorism. Can you explain why that classification would be so significant for this?
There was an exchange between Deputy Director Paul Abate and Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, where to the lay person, it seems reasonable. The FBI wants to open up all avenues, remove the blindfold, have no blinders on, consider the fact that this could be assassination, this could be domestic terrorism, all outlets on the table. However, to the non-lay person, to the subject matter expert, when you designate something as a domestic terrorist investigation, that enables you to make it classified. And when you have a classification code on there, you have to have a need to know and a security clearance. So now the FBI has set itself up to walk back into the Senate chamber during a hearing and say, I'm sorry, You don't have a right to that information. I can't reveal sources and methods. We can't reveal information about an ongoing investigation. You don't have the need to know where the necessary clearance is. And now the American people are not going to have the transparency that we ultimately need for this investigation.
And earlier this week, Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe testified in the Senate oversight hearing about the assassination attempt. And Lindsey Graham had a very concerning solution for the issues with the investigation. Let's listen to that quick.
We have encrypted apps of an assassin, a murderer, and we can't get into them all these days after. That needs to be fixed, folks. I'm all for privacy, but to a point. What if in the future somebody's using these apps to communicate with a foreign power? I think we need to know these things. We need to know them in real time.
Steve, can you explain what Lindsey Graham is trying to propose there for the American people and how that would really affect privacy rights in the United States?
Well, it effectively makes the Fourth Amendment dead letter at that point. They want a lawful access, a skeleton key to encrypted communications that we all have. I mean, if you have Signal chat or WhatsApp or something to that effect, even iMessage is encrypted. But Senator Graham has proposed in the past and co-sponsored legislation that would give the FBI the backdoor access to those applications for real time, which means continually monitoring it. This is the government assuming that a tool will be used for ill when it is just a tool because we don't trust the government in this country. The job of law enforcement is not supposed to be easy. You're supposed to have a reasonable suspicion, probable cause. The burden is supposed to be there. They do not need these tools. It's no different than saying locks are bad. I use a lock on my house. I use a lock on my car, keep my family and my belongings safe. But because I can use a lock to put someone in a closet and kidnap them, now we have to remove locks. It's no different. The analogy holds.
Steve, yesterday, the New York Times and many others are already starting to chime in saying some Republicans are embracing conspiracy theories when it comes to the assassination. This is no surprise, but what boggles my mind is that the fact pattern here is going to make the JFK assassination look like a buttoned up, straightforward event. And, already they're throwing this around. Do you have any thoughts about this?
I think that there's any sort of allegation about malfeasance on the hands of the federal government here in the handling of what goes on, that'll be easily chalked up as conspiracy theory because those agencies want to protect their image, this myth of competence that they have. Here, you can make all the conspiracy allegations you want, but it presupposes one thing, that the Secret Service is always perfect and on point except for this one time. It's my contention that these sorts of lapses have been going on a regular fashion, and the manpower has been shortened because of the decisions made on high. And it's just happened to be this one time in Butler, Pennsylvania, that the subject decided to take action. And we're lucky he didn't before then. And we need to create these changes now so that nothing can happen in the near future, as a whistleblower came out and said he feared there would be another attack within the next 30 days.
Yeah, we heard from Senator Johnson yesterday. He was talking about all the conspiracy theories. Well, you're going to have all of those things come up, but the antidote to a conspiracy theory is more information. And the Secret Service has yet to provide that level of information where people have to just stop and actually sit back and say, okay, maybe we are getting some of the facts of the case coming out. So at what point will we ever get that information, that level of information that is needed?
When our elected officials are actually willing to hold these agencies accountable and pull their funding entirely unless they're going to be brought to heel. The FBI, the Secret Service, all federal law enforcement exists in this bubble where the expectations of them are so low. What people don't realize is if you're an FBI agent, you only have to do one investigative action on a case every 90 days. From their perspective, 60 days cuts their time down significantly. The ask of them is actually really great at that point. These people have a myth of competence that just frankly isn't true, and they need to address that and bring them up to the standard that we all sort of have this expectation that's completely false because we watch TV and movies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Steve. I mean, as soon as this happened, one of the first things that I said, just as editor-in-chief here, is if they don't put out information, it's going to cause problems. And it's almost as if they want to do that. So that being said, that's what they're doing. What do you think the viable path is to actually get to the truth here? What are the chances of that? And what does that look like? How is that going to happen?
For me, it's going to come up to the funding battle that we're going to have in Congress. And I think that one of the leverage points that the House Republicans should use is we're going to have an independent investigation. Let's bring on some actual experienced investigators, give them the resources and the power, run it parallel with the FBI. The FBI has proven itself to be politically partisan and inept. I mean, they said the baseball shooting wasn't even an assassination attempt. They can have to be dismissed entirely. There needs to be a parallel investigation that is fully transparent with daily briefings. Let's pretend like we're back in the coronavirus days and we have to have the doctors coming out and providing updates to the American people. We're at that level now, and we should be able to devote some of the resources toward this and let it be a shot across the bow of the FBI and say, hey, look, we just got some independent guys that did a better job than you. Maybe we don't, after all, need all the power to be at your fingertips.